Hello, and welcome to Keep Left, the podcast that looks at things from the left side of the political spectrum. I'm John O'Connor. Thanks for your patience. As always, please like and subscribe. I know I'm supposed to say that. I barely ever say that. Thanks for joining me on this dive into American and international politics from time to time. There's a lot happening, going on all at the same time around the world. So it's hard to know where to begin. Every time I start to do an outline for one of these things, something else happens that makes the outline completely pointless and useless. Yes, I do want to get back to Project 2025, even though the head of it has supposedly stepped down and said that there's nothing for us to be doing. There's just so much entanglement between 2025 and the Trump campaign that if they get elected, they are going to just rely on it. Because as of right now, there is no Trump transition in and of itself. They are going to be relying on what's in that. And I will make that point very clear when I proceed to that. But right now, I want to have sort of a more of a fun podcast because with the Harris campaign in full swing and Kamala Harris now the not just the presumptive nominee, but frankly, the nominee of the Democratic Party since the virtual roll call was held. She is in the process of finalizing her vice presidential selection, and she will probably have it done by tomorrow night. Today is Sunday. If she doesn't have it by tonight, frankly, it'll probably get leaked sometime tonight or tomorrow, and the official announcement is bound to be tomorrow night, if not by Tuesday, when she is supposed to do an official announcement and a tour. I on X, formerly known as Twitter, I did a brief rundown of who I thought was who were the best choices for various reasons. So I thought I'd do a quick rundown of that on sort of video form, and why I sort of think those ways. And so I'm going to go in order of who I think are just the best choices from a political perspective. I actually think all six of these finalists are good choices. I don't think there's a bad choice. So it's sort of like, the 100-meter run today where, first from last place was, half a second, right? The sixth place finisher is still going to be a good choice and is going to help Harris win an election. And any Monday morning quarterbacking at the end of the day, I don't think is going to change much. If Harris winds up losing, which I hope she doesn't, the VP choice is unlikely to have made much of a difference. If there's a skeleton in the closet that comes up later, maybe that's a possibility of something bad happening. But the hope is that all these people have been in the public eye enough that any skeletons would have already come out. But we'll see. So I want to start out with who I think, for me, is sort of the best political choice, and that's Governor Beshear of the state of Kentucky. Now, he was an attorney general at the same time Kamala Harris was attorney general of the state of California, and she and he knew each other from that period, so they have already a working connection. And they've known each other for a long time based on that. They have worked together in that process. He is the son of a previous governor of Kentucky. He has held a seat not once but twice, despite the fact that Trump carried Kentucky by, I think, 20 points. Beshear held Kentucky by 5, which is no small feat. He led Kentucky through the COVID pandemic as well as through various disasters. He is regarded very fondly. I think he's one of the highest rated governors, full stop, in the country, let alone a Democratic governor. And I think his bona fides are that in response to J.D. Vance, he can make the case that he actually can speak to middle Americans, to rural Americans, to people from the Appalachian Mountains, from anyone who is actually from a hardscrabble background and can speak to their concerns. Despite being a Democrat in a ruby red state, he has made the case, made pitches for supporting transgender children, for supporting LGBTQ children, for being pro-union, for doing, all those things, for being pro-choice. If you saw a couple years ago, he did this devastating pro-choice commercial talking about I think a 14-year-old girl who was raped, and if she weren't able to get an abortion, she would have had to carry a baby to term, and the rapist would have had a say in what happened to the child, and it was just purely devastating. And that was for Kentucky. And so he has the ability to speak to a lot of issues that are incredibly important for the Democratic Party on a lot of different issues. He has a picture-perfect family, and he's someone who I think can do a lot to position a ticket as a moderate, despite the fact that he sort of has these positions that are really at the center of the Democratic Party in terms of equal rights, in terms of abortion and so forth. He also presents himself as a moderate. You can't really come up through Kentucky without having a moderate position on gun safety and gun rights and so forth and so on. And he can kind of, I think, translate the Democratic ticket into those moderate terms, which might, I don't think he would carry Kentucky, certainly, but he can certainly translate that into similar demographics in states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. As far as the downsides goes, I don't think there really are downsides. Like, I think if there were any skeletons in the closet, I do kind of think the McConnell machine in Kentucky would have found them by now. I don't think he would have had a second term in Kentucky if there was anything in his background that they could have used to stop him by now. McConnell and other people have a history of trying to target people who might one day be stars of the Democratic Party and trying to stop them before they get any groundwork. It's a little known story, but McConnell apparently sent Karl Rove out to help the Republican who was running against Harris for Attorney General in California to try to stop Harris from winning, because they were afraid that she would be a future Democratic star. And, I would imagine that the same thing is true with Beshear here, that, at some point they would have tried to have stopped him or tried to find something on him. Ain't no such thing, right? And I don't think it can be underestimated that the lack of downsides, like, I've not heard any part of the Democratic Party have anything bad to say about him, and that cannot be underestimated, right? If you are in a position where you are trying to play it safe, it's Andy Beshear, hands down, and he has the positives on top of that, right? So, they're not huge positives. Like, I don't think you look at him and his career and his background and say, central casting vice president, that's our guy. But you look at him and say, wow, he's got B's all across the board. That's not a bad report card, right? There's no negatives against him. So for me, that's why I would say he's probably the best political choice of all the candidates here. For me, the second choice is Senator Kelly of Arizona. And one large part of that for me is that this is a man with a resume that Aaron Sorkin wishes he had come up with for The West Wing, right? This is a guy who is literally a former combat pilot who flew missions, became an astronaut, has a twin brother who was also an astronaut, brought a gorilla suit up onto the International Space Station to play a prank on his fellow astronauts, married a representative in Congress. The representative in Congress had an assassination attempt against her. The two of them went on to become major gun control advocates. He eventually runs for Senate, gets Senator McCain's seat in a special election, runs for re-election, holds that seat, is a very moderate Democratic senator, in a swing state. And that's hard to beat, right? That is a resume that is significantly difficult to beat. Just take a step back. One thing I also will be looking at for these things, and this is maybe the only negative on Beshear, Mark Kelly is a very good fundraiser. He has the knack for interacting with people one-on-one and being able to get fundraising. Beshear, not as great. Like, he hasn't had those sorts of connections. I mean, definitely in Kentucky politics, yes, but in terms of on a national stage, I don't think he has as much experience. Mark Kelly definitely has that knack. Does have that knack for politics. I would imagine, had things run out differently, he'd probably be running for president in 4 years, and was probably like working towards getting that sort of the money together for that. So he's got the fundraising capabilities. There are, however, some downsides for him politically. He has staked out some positions that sort of bring him in alignment with Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin, who are both Democrats but kind of independents, who have broken with Democrats in terms of border issues, in terms of filibuster issues, and in terms of a few other issues. He has definitely supported. I mean, he does give cover to Harris on any kind of border issues because he has pushed for stronger border controls. He has definitely heft in sort of turning the tables on the Republican ticket and sort of saying, hey, look, we had a deal and you're the ones who sort of torched it. We could actually have stopped any of these issues you're saying about the border, but you're the ones who stopped it. And he has the heft to say that. But he has a bad union record. He is not the best speaker. In between being an astronaut and being a senator, he was working on a sort of project with China to invest in various businesses. I believe that's actually where he met his wife, Giffords. And he's used some of that money, Chinese money, to start a weather balloon company. And there's nothing nefarious about any of that, but it doesn't look good from the perspective of any of those stupid attacks from Trump on the China question. So there's some minor detriments there, but it does create a very balanced ticket, right? Harris, if there's any negatives on her resume, it's from the military angle, from the the ersatz border attacks, and from being seen as a liberal, even though she's a prosecutor. So he does present a fantastic balancing, much as Beshear provides that balancing as well. So again, I think Kelly brings better positives, but also more negatives when contrasted with Beshear. Doesn't bring executive experience necessarily, but does bring that personal life balance and does bring that experience balance. He's not a great speaker. He's not as good on TV or on speaker as a lot of the other people who are on this list. But he's good. Like, he's not bad, certainly. And I think his method of being very much more militarily focused has its own benefits, and I think it would stand as a stark contrast to both Trump and Vance, for that matter, and would make a very good ticket. So I think that's certainly why I would put him second. In third place, I would put everyone's favorite high school teacher now, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. I think even though I put him in third, I think everyone really underrates him as a politician. This is a guy with a fantastic resume as a politician, not just everything else that goes on with him. This is a man who was in the Army Reserve, who reached the rank of Sergeant Major. So he has a military background. He also was a high school coach and for football. And as a football coach, also sponsored his high school LGBTQ Alliance Club when no one else would. So he has like that personal story there as well. He, I think, taught geography in high school. He's also served as a representative, so he has that House experience that former Senator Harris lacks. He was very well regarded in the House. He actually was part of a skeet club in the House where he and a bunch of mostly Republicans would go out shooting every couple of weeks, and he apparently would be much better than anyone else and would rub it in his Republican colleagues' noses how much better of a shooter he was than they were, even though he was in favor of gun control and they weren't. So he has a definitely capacity for sort of, and as if everyone has seen him on the news over the last couple of weeks, he has the ability to sort of, for lack of a better phrase, talk normal, right? He has an ability to sort of break things down into, ways of speaking that reflect people's lived experiences. In part because his path wasn't necessarily just through politics and government. His path was through being a high school coach and working with kids and obviously working with families, and being a sergeant major where you are in the National Army Reserve, where you're working with literally people from all walks of life, right, in Minnesota. And so, this is someone with a lot of interpersonal experience and ability to communicate. And as I understand it, when he was in the local government before he went into the House, his district was a rural district. And so he built up a background of working through his district, talking to as many people as he could. And so, having that communication style. He's also been the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. And I think this is one of the reasons why I think people, even as much as he's gotten a lot of press, people have been sleeping on him a little bit because he is also an incredible fundraiser. He has built up a huge war chest for Democratic governors as leader of that organization. And so that is why Democratic governors have been doing really, really well over the last couple of years because of his work raising money for them. And that is nothing to sneeze at. So, take whatever rankings you give him and, add a couple notches for that. He is a skillful politician on top of whatever else you think of him as sort of your favorite high school coach. Where I think his negatives are that I think also if you watch him give talks, he's not controlled. I don't think he does meander a lot. He's not. I do wonder the extent to which he could stick to a script and a message. He could be fine. I don't know. I don't know if he's had to or been asked to. I don't know how he is in actual interpersonal discussions. I don't know the extent to which he is just essentially trying to flood the zone, if you will, when he talks on news channels to try to get as much out as he can in limited time. He does seem to have that sense of when he is talking, just going from thing to thing to thing to thing until someone stops him. And again, I don't know if that's on purpose or that's just a style. I haven't seen enough of him to know that. So I don't know if that's what he would be like on a debate stage or if he can be more controlled. The other thing is that there are suggestions that one of the biggest pieces of, I think, Medicare fraud as well as some COVID-19 issues came up during his time as governor, and he didn't catch it necessarily. So that is something that in the vetting process would have come up. I don't know the extent to which his office would have been or should have been even on top of that. I don't know to that extent, but I know that is an angle of attack on him. There's also an argument to be made that he was slow in calling out the National Guard during various protests and riots at various stages of the George Floyd protests when they did turn violent. And so you can expect that to try to be hung on him. I would also make the argument that if you're trying to formulate a ticket that is balanced, where you're trying to find someone to balance out the perception of Harris as a Berkeley liberal, a Minnesota liberal is not exactly, a Minnesota progressive is not exactly someone who balances that out. It reinforces it. Also, if you're trying to go for change, Harris is 60 or 59, about to turn 60. Tim Walz is only 6 months older than her. That's right. They're about the same age. And he looks easily 10 years older. That's not his fault, but that doesn't exactly speak to a young ticket, right? It's true of also Kelly. Beshear looks and is 10 years younger than Harris, and so presents a ticket that looks more youthful, right? And still mature. Walz, I think, looks older than he is. Perceptions do count for something. I don't know how much that would count. And so what message are you sending with your ticket? I think that is something that should be at the back of the mind of Harris as she's doing this. Like, when you're looking at previous tickets, right? One of the reasons why people were shocked that Clinton chose Gore was because usually you want to do a balanced ticket. So everyone thought that Clinton would choose someone from the North or from the West. And instead he chose someone from Tennessee, also a southern border state. And the reason I think that worked out so brilliantly was because it reinforced his message of change. We are a young change ticket, and we're doing two aspects of this change. We're both Southerners. We're slightly different Southerners because Gore is much more precise and whatever, but we're both representing a new generation, right? And Harris is representing change and a new way of doing things and a way of being upbeat, a happy warrior, right? Now, if that's her message, Walz fits perfectly. Walz fits perfectly. He is a happy warrior, right? Kelly, not happy warrior. Beshear, sort of. You can sort of see. I think he was one of the people who said that J.D. Vance ain't from around here, and everyone from the Appalachians sort of, twinged because that's a hell of an attack. So it depends on the message they want to go with. But that's why I sort of put Walz at number 3 here, because I do think he's kind of got a few negatives there. But again, like I said, all 6 of these people will be perfectly fine picks. So who's my number 5? What? Who's this guy? He's been sort of overlooked by everyone in the media. People will have forgotten that he's even on this list. And you may be forgiven for not knowing who he is. This is Governor J.B. Pritzker of the great state of Illinois. And he's been completely overlooked by everyone. Some people don't even think he's part of the finalist group. That could be because he, unlike just about everyone else on this list, probably hasn't leaked anything because he knows better. Also, I think part of it is because the convention is in Chicago, and so he's been part of the convention organizing, and I don't think his people even have the strength or energy to leak anything. He is the second-term governor of Illinois. He is a billionaire heir to the Hyatt hotel legacy. He self-financed his campaigns for Illinois. He is a Ukrainian Jewish non-practicing person. He is reasonably popular in Illinois. It's a fairly Democratic state. Occasionally, a Republican has taken the governorship, but that's really about it. And occasionally, a Senate seat here or there. But by and large, it's been a blue state, both for presidential elections and for governors and Senate seats, pretty much since the beginning of time. It's not a swing state by any stretch of the imagination. Same with Minnesota. It's been pretty reliably Democratic. I think for Walz, I think what you bring him because he translates the message very well of, we're normal, they're weird. Pritzker doesn't get you that. Pritzker is an oligarch, but what does he bring you? He brings you executive experience. He brings you an ability to actually a pretty good messenger. If you watch on YouTube, there's a couple of commercials he's done. There's one recently that dropped, sort of gearing up for the convention, talking about all the changes that have happened in Illinois under his governorship, which is fairly nakedly hey, this is why you should choose me as vice president, where he talks about how awesome Illinois has been for union rights, for LGBTQ rights, for health services, for transportation, for infrastructure. And for business too. Like he is the person who can say, look, he can convey the message that progressive values are also business values. And he can make that message of stop trying to draw a schism between progressive values and business values, trying to draw a wedge between, trying to say that what we're in favor of is somehow anti-American, right? And so I think he's got a shot still. I think he's a dark horse. I think you write him off at your own peril. I do think he's, as someone who, obviously, if he's in the final six and people aren't talking about him, the fact that he is discreet can only be helpful to him in these parts. I think it's astonishing that people keep sort of sleeping on him. The downsides for him, again, he is a billionaire, and I don't know. Now, I think you can sort of have him talk about him being a real billionaire. That Hyatt hasn't gone into bankruptcy while Trump hotels have, would be a lot of fun to say. And the fact that if there's ever any fundraising issues, he can just write a check. He's overweight, which in our stupid age of how things look, being important is a problem, I guess. He looks like you would sort of think an Illinois mob boss might look, I suppose. I think those are sort of the negatives there. I think people don't know him, and he's done a few spots here and there to support Harris, but in the spots he's done, he's been very effective. I like him especially as a Ukrainian extraction, because I think he would be really good at bringing that to the forefront and really tearing into Vance on his sort of who cares about Ukraine. I think it'd be good to have a Jewish person on the ticket, and we'll be talking about Shapiro in a little bit here. There's no major downsides beyond that, other than his lack of, people knowing about him outside of Illinois. He seems, like I said, fairly popular in Illinois, like decent favorability ratings. So, I put him sort of here because I think he hasn't been well thought of. I know he's been vetted. I know Harris has talked to him about it. And I think you can't ignore him, or at least you ignore him at the peril. His balance on the ticket, I think, has also got to be, the message, again, we're normal and we're pro-business. And I think that's not a bad message to come up with. Because I think if you seriously dig into the Republican messaging and the policies, they're anti-business. They just are, quite simply. In fifth place, Pete Buttigieg, although he's number one in my heart. What can you say about Pete Buttigieg? The former mayor of South Bend, a man who went to Harvard, went into the Army, went into Special Forces, served in Afghanistan. One of the smartest people in politics. Taught himself Norwegian so he can read a book in the original language. When he was mayor of South Bend, just charmed everyone because he was approachable and worked his butt off to try to serve his people. Would occasionally just show up to translate at the hospital because they couldn't get the translators in time, so he would hear on the police dispatch and just show up. He's one of the best communicators to the Democratic Party. Every time he shows up on Fox, it's like a dose of just pure. It's like your nasal passages clear up, your pores clear up, and you're just in a good mood for the rest of the day, right? The joy of seeing him possibly face off with J.D. Vance, it just makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, doesn't it? He's, I think, someone who most of the Democratic activists would like to see. I think if you do any polling of any state outside of like Michigan or Pennsylvania or Minnesota, Buttigieg is the one the Democrats want to see on the ticket because he's so amazing and because he's so bright and because you just understand where he's coming from, and he can put things in the proper context in clear ways, and can parse arguments coming from the other side so clearly and cleanly. You know, but let's break it down politically. What does he bring to the ticket? He's got, for quote unquote a weird name by American standards, he brings great name recognition to the ticket. Like, people know who he is. He got handed a booby prize, so to speak, as a member of cabinet and Department of Transportation, because it truly is a hiding to nothing, right? Things break down all the time. That's just how it is. It's perennially underfunded. And he's done as well as he can. He's always been on top of airlines to try to get them to do their jobs. Airlines hate him for that as well. He's unlikely to bring Indiana. He's unlikely to have much of an effect on Michigan, where he lives now. What message do you send if you bring him on a ticket with Harris? It's continuity with the Biden administration. You've got the vice president and the secretary of transport. Nothing wrong with that, but you're not exactly distancing yourself from the Biden administration. You're just sort of saying, yeah, we're picking that up and continuing forward, which is fine if that's your message, but you just have to be prepared for that. You're also picking up a fight back that you have to be prepared for, which is that the Republicans are going to come back with every single plane delay, the derailment in East Palestine, the every single problem that's ever existed on any train track, any flight, any boat capsizement, any bridge falling, is going to be pinned on Buttigieg from the last 4 years. And you just got to deal with that. And in terms of the story of your ticket, you are also fighting this perception from a lot of people that you have a double minority ticket, right? You have a biracial woman at the top of your ticket and a gay man at the bottom of the ticket as a vice president. I know most people don't have a problem with that, but you're going to see the worst of humanity, and in the next 94 days. And you just got to be ready for that. And is everyone ready for that? I don't know. Does Harris see this as a fight worth having? Or does Harris see that as, we got to try to go in a different path? I don't know. He brings a different sort of balance to the ticket, though, because, again, as with Kelly, and to a degree as with Walz, he has a military background, right? He has, he served in special forces. He's got a very different view of the world than Harris does. He's got a different mindset, and I think would provide a good governing balance that way. I think he's someone who would have, as with most of the people on this list, to be fair, I think would have that sense of the world that he could govern very well with Harris. I think a lot of the downsides here are not so much anything personally. As far as anyone can tell, he's lived a perfect, like, if there's a scandal that happens to Pete Buttigieg, I think everyone is going to be shocked, right? This guy's got to be squeaky clean. Like, there's been no, the chances of him having any kind of scandal are just remote by every stretch of the imagination. I think that's kind of where I am with him. I think it could be him. I just find it would be really interesting and difficult because of the extra work that might have to be done and the energy expense to sort of deal with all those things on top of everything else happening, because of how horrible the opponents are. And then finally, the sixth person is Ben Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. He is also someone who was a former attorney general of Pennsylvania before he became governor 2 years ago. or actually, yes, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Also Attorney General at the same time that Harris was Attorney General of California. Pennsylvania, an incredibly important swing state here. He has one of the highest favorability ratings of any governor in any state across the country. Won by a huge margin in Pennsylvania. Got a lot of outperformed Trump. Biden carried Pennsylvania by just a couple of points. He carried Pennsylvania by 15, 20, if I remember correctly. So there is this sense that Shapiro could be the magic bullet that carries him. He is an amazing orator. As many people have said, if you close your eyes and listen to Shapiro, you pretty much hear Obama. He's almost certainly copied his speaking style on Obama, and there's absolutely literally nothing wrong with that. There are far worse people to copy your speaking styles on, and nothing good for him. I wish I could speak like that. Firebrand of a speaker, very formidable on the stump, incredibly smart. Very good at dissecting arguments, very good at fundraising as well. Something that, by the way, Buttigieg, I don't know the extent to which he's a good fundraiser. He got a lot of funding as president from that name recognition. He gets a lot of help from small donors. I don't know the extent to which he's been sort of good with large donors as such. But anyway, very well liked, obviously, with a lot of big donors. Done a lot of work. Very in the whole sort of Northeast tri-state area. A lot of those funding mechanisms are interconnected, and he's done just gangbusters there. And he's sort of the odds-on pick, and yet I'm putting him here at number 6. And it's not necessarily for the reasons that I think a lot of people are disparaging him. I think for me, it's not it's because he's Jewish. I don't actually think that makes as big a difference as it would have done stupidly 20 years ago with Lieberman, for example. Because I don't think it does make a difference anymore. I don't think, Pritzker is a non-practicing Jew. I don't think that makes a difference. Shapiro, as I understand, is a conservative Jew. Takes the Sabbath off. I think where you run into some trouble with Shapiro is more how he's handled a couple of things in ways that run him into trouble with parts of the Democratic base. For example, I think it's not so much coming down hard on the anti-Israel treatment of Gaza protesters, because I think a lot of governors did that, and I think I think Walz did that. I think Pritzker did that. I think Newsom did it. I think it's comparing them to the KKK, where you sort of have a problem. I think it's the problem he has is also with the paying off his co-worker, or one of his people's sexual harassment suit, and there's an NDA with it, which is fine, and therefore you can't really talk about it. But then he didn't remove his friend until the news team started calling about it, which kind of evinces a bad way of going about things, right? So those I think are some troubling things, and that is, and especially that second one with the sexual harassment thing, where there is an NDA, and so therefore you can't actually properly defend yourself from it, right? That is a gift that keeps on giving for any opponent, right? So what you're saying is, we've got this thing that we can have whatever we want to say about it, and you can't fight back. We can run this for weeks, right? And look, it might amount to nothing. Maybe there are aspects of it that we don't know about that can be resolved, and through the vetting process that is no doubt going on right now, they've resolved it, and hopefully they have. And and maybe there are ways that Harris and Shapiro have worked out how to deal with the Gaza KKK comments. I'm sure they've talked about it. I like everyone else will happily support whoever Harris picks. I think though that it's one of those things where when you have a bunch of people who also can do it, why pick the ones with the higher risk? That said, I also think that Shapiro represents the highest reward. You know how when I said Beshear is like all B's with zero downside? I think Shapiro is like A's with downsides, right? I think Shapiro, because of his ability to because of his ability to give really good, uplifting speeches, because of his intelligence, and because of his ability to fundraise, and because of his ability to possibly single-handedly carry Pennsylvania, and his ability to sort of translate that into other states, I believe, and the ability to hopefully, if they're smart about it between the two of them, bring together the various rifts around Israel, because he has also, by the way, called Netanyahu the worst leader in Israeli history. I think if you're able to sort of heal those rifts, then you have an opportunity to really push the Democratic Party forward. So it's huge risk, huge reward, right? But that's the chances you're taking here, and so it just depends on, what message you want to send, how they want to play it, and really just sort of how Harris feels about these people. Again, at the end of the day, Harris has said, sort of made it clear that for her, it's who she's going to govern well with. And anyone who says they know what the answer to that are just frankly lying to themselves, right? They just are. I will say, I will add one or two things. I think the other problem with Shapiro, for me anyway, is just how nakedly ambitious he is. I think that's also somewhat true of Buttigieg. Those are two people who just feel so ambitious, and it radiates off both of them, right? And I don't know, like, yeah, Biden was ambitious, right? And Harris is obviously ambitious. But you don't want someone who is so ambitious that you'll ever be worried they'll stick the knife in to you too soon, right? And I don't know if Buttigieg and Shapiro are those people. I think Buttigieg is less than Shapiro. I don't know either of them that well. But they kind of have that vibe. Shapiro especially. And maybe, who else sort of gave me that vibe? I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush was far too loyal to ever do that. Rick Nixon kind of had that vibe of disloyalty back in the day, right? Someone who was just waiting. I'm just waiting for that moment. Just waiting for you to stumble, and then I'm in, right? And so I think that's one of those things where you just kind of want to be careful. And, maybe I'm 100% wrong, and he'll be an entirely loyal foot soldier. But that is just one of those things that you kind of want to keep an eye on here. We'll see how things pan out. It'll be a fascinating choice that Harris will make, probably in the next 24 hours. And maybe I'll check my Twitter before I post this, and she'll have made the choice anyway. But anyway, thank you so much again. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And hopefully we'll be back with more stuff on the news anytime soon. Thank you so much. Keep calm, keep fighting, and as always, keep left.